Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Banished. It's a city builder of sorts. More of a town or village builder, really. Building an entire city is effectively impossible. You are dealing with very small numbers of people, relatively speaking. Think of SimCity, you've got thousands, tens of thousands of population. Here, well, you're lucky to get past the 100, because Banished is based on survival more so than anything else, and you can lose. And you probably will, an awful lot. It's brought to you by Shining Rock Software. And as you can see in the background, this is one of my many failed villages, actually. I've already put 10 hours into this. I think with city builders in particular, you have to put a significant amount of time in before you can do a first impression. So I think I've done like 4 cities. I say cities, 4 villages. And I'm going to start another one for you here and play it on accelerated speed, just so you can see the growth a little quicker. And I think I've got the basic idea of what's going on with it. So let's start by looking at the options menu, shall we? And look at game options. A lot of solid stuff that you would expect out of a strategy game of some description. Funnily enough, you might actually want the autosave to be on a higher amount of time. And you're gonna tell me, you're gonna say, what? Why? That's insanity. Like, that's not the point of autosave. The reason you want it on a higher amount of time is because you can screw up pretty badly and get to a point of either no return or just a slow, painful death. And if your autosave was 5 minutes ago, chances are you don't have any possibility of avoiding it. I like the fact they've got the UI scale here. I'm actually going to increase this slightly just for the purposes of the video to make it a little bit easier for you to see, because things like fonts and certain elements of the UI are quite small. If you happen to be watching this on a mobile device, you may be struggling to read a lot of it. Switch between Fahrenheit and Celsius if you so desire. You can turn weather effects off, which can be quite useful. There are times when snow in particular really obscures your vision, so you might want to consider that one. Video options actually is a DirectX 9 game. Doesn't really look it, although I would say that the water effects are quite impressive. And then you got your VSync, full screen, and windowed options available. AA, texture filtering, shadow resolution, shadow quality, pretty much. Runs rock solid, haven't had any performance issues whatsoever, although my wife was playing it on her laptop and did experience some DirectX 11 issues, which involved the camera kind of jumping around. Not really sure what was up with that. Could just be a mobile-specific thing. By that, I mean a mobile GPU. But I've had no problems on DirectX 11. Audio sliders separate, available for everything, and then you've got your input hotkeys, which you can use them if you want. It is not a game where you need to, because you can actually change the time scale of the game, and you can completely pause it and build stuff in pause if you wish. But it's for convenience, and you'll need to know things like rotating buildings and toggling things like pathing methods and so on and so forth. Okay. Well, that was a mistake. Turns out I made the UI smaller, not bigger. Whoops! Alright, let's try and resolve that, shall we? Not quite what I was aiming to do. Let's go down to 75. There we go, that should make things a little bit easier. Notice it actually went slightly blurry there, which is a little disappointing, but we'll go with that simply because it will make things easier to see. We're going to start a new village. We'll see where we go with it. Now, the game does not have a campaign mode. It has 4 tutorials, which I wouldn't say they're bad, it's just they're very lengthy. And the way that they do it is a lot of reading, a lot of text. And if you don't read and you just build what it tells you to build, which more often than not, it's the only thing you're allowed to build, then you're not going to learn anything. So you do have to read quite a significant amount. It's not a complicated game, but it is a difficult game simply because it's a very, very careful balance. So let's set up something else. We can change the map seed. All the maps are randomly generated, by the way. So some of them could be absolutely dreadful. Some of them, not so much. You can then pick your terrain type. You can choose your terrain size, small, medium, or large. Mess around with the climate if you so desire. Turn disasters on and off. And then you've got 3 starting conditions. Easy gives you 6 families, a large amount of pretty much everything you could desire, as well as a herd of livestock, which is a huge deal, by the way. And then medium, well, you start with some stuff. You've got some seeds and things like that. And you don't start with livestock, meaning that you can't farm them in any way unless you're able to buy them from a trader. At least as far as I'm aware. I think you can get them from nomads as well, but I've never actually had a nomad come to my village, even with a town hall and everything, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that. And then you got hard. This is ridiculous. Barely start with anything, no seeds for farming whatsoever. This is basically scavenging off the land, and acquiring seeds is extremely expensive, so it's difficult. Medium is the default and kind of supposed to be. Beesville. There we go. Very friendly place is Beesville. And let's begin, shall we? See what we get. Now, we'll call this a city builder, just for the sake of convenience. As I said before, there's no city per se, it's a village. So this is what you got. A barn, this amount of resources, and these dudes. And these dudes have nowhere to live. And if they have nowhere to live, they'll die. It's as simple as that. Exposure to the elements is a very real thing in this game, and actually making sure that your citizens are warm enough and properly fed so they don't die is actually the point of the game. It's almost less of a city builder and more of a survival simulation. So I'll show you exactly what's going on with it. Well, what are we going to need? What have we got to start with, more to the point? Firewood, logs, which can, of course, be made into firewood, but is also used the building material, 40 iron, 60 stone, and then some tools, coats, which are very much required in order to survive the harsh winters, and a bunch of potatoes, which will keep us alive for a little while, but we need to figure out exactly what to do here. So the first thing we'll probably need is more wood, because a lot of the initial buildings, you're going to need wood for them. Now, how would you get that? Well, you can actually remove pretty much any resource on the map by simply going to removal tools, click remove resources, and then just do that, yeah? And what that's going to do is it's going to send laborers from your town to take their tools and hack down trees and break stone and mine iron deposits that are inexplicably lying around the place. And that's that. The problem with that is that, well, they don't come back. Once you've taken that stone and iron, it's gone. So you'll actually need things like quarries and mines to permanently generate it. But they take a lot of space, they cost a lot, and they use a lot of citizens to actually mine from. So we'll probably want to clear this area first, because we need space to actually build. But we will also want to think about sustainable forestry, which we can do with a forester. So first things first, I think this entire area here needs to be cleared out. So I'm going to do just that. And before I start, I'm going to show you the fact that the interface, for some reason, doesn't really have anything toggled on by default. So the first thing you want to do is go to here. Let's turn on my general statistics, put my event log on. We can pop that there. It's kind of obscuring parts of the screen. I'll give you that, but it is very useful. And then that is the jobs menu right there. So as you'll notice, there are a lot of different things your citizens can do, and indeed should do. In this case, we've got all of our citizens as laborers, meaning they're going to go and do what I asked them to do here, clear this area. They move goods, they clear areas, yeah, they do easy tasks. And then, of course, you need builders to build stuff, and yeah, it's really simple as that. Managing your citizens is a fairly intensive task, and more often than not involves you reprioritizing what they're actually doing, because there are certain times, like say in the middle of winter, you don't want any farmers because there's nothing to farm. So that's something to consider, and you can go on from there and figure out, oh, okay, well, there's going to be some micromanagement involved. Yup, there's going to be quite a bit of it. So as I mentioned earlier, you can increase the simulation speed, and you damn well should, because at the start it's going to be painfully slow. But later on, you might want to slow things down, because if things start to get out of control, you're in serious trouble. Now, I think we're going to need a larger stockpile here, considering the stuff that they're going to be throwing at us. So I'm going to build a large stockpile next to here. That's free, so that doesn't really cost me anything whatsoever. And we're going to need some houses, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm going to... I think you start with 5 families, so 5 houses is usually a good amount. We're going to get a lot of wood and a lot of stone from this area, so this shouldn't be too much of a problem. There is the possibility we're going to break a hell of a lot of our tools doing this, so that can be a bit of a risk, but we've got a decent amount to start with. Okay, so they're going to start building houses, and it kind of goes on from there. You're going to need various resource mining tools, like say we want to get some food. That's probably a good idea. One of the more basic food things is a gathering hut. This gathers stuff all year round, and is very useful in that regard. But it also takes a lot of space in terms of the fact that you can't have many of them overlapping. So I'm going to put a gathering hut there. But there's that giant area that it's going to gather from, and that means that people are going to go to the gathering hut, they're going to look for berries, they're going to look for nuts and onions and all sorts of things like that. As you can see, we start with a lot of potatoes, but we're going to need a proper source of food eventually. Yep, storage is near capacity. That's because we actually have not got this stockpile going yet, which is a little silly. Now, if you want your citizens to do something else that they're currently not doing, you can increase priority on a certain area. So right now we can't build the stockpile because there's trees in the way, so I've reprioritized that area, and that's that. Alright, in the meantime, we're getting a gatherer, which is good. Yeah. We might want to maybe get an orchard. That takes a lot of space though, and we don't really have a lot of space yet. So a hunting cabin would probably be quite useful. Now I'm going to rotate it around. The nice thing that I really like about the way that this game does building is it makes it very easy to set up a road system, because all of these buildings have a front, and you'll see the green arrows pointing in there, and it's very easy to then build roads around it. Now, I wouldn't recommend that you necessarily accelerate things to as fast as I have, because if you want to place things really optimally, then there's a lot of learning involved here, and I certainly haven't learned all the tricks of Banished by any stretch, and I think that would probably take hundreds of hours to make the optimal village, and you know, I feel like I'm doing a bit better every time before all of my citizens die. You know, it looks nice and tranquil to start with, but it gets incredibly stressful as diseases start to ravage your village. People die of starvation and exposure. You don't have enough coats, you don't have enough firewood, you don't have enough food, you don't have enough anything. It becomes a massive resource balancing management game once you get further on into it, even though it seems nice and easy now. You know, it is. This is the basic stuff. Alright, we're gonna gather all this stuff, we're going to set up forestry, we're going to make sure we get enough food and all that kind of stuff. That sounds easy, and it is. But you've got to manage the number of people you've got. I only have 11 adults. I have 6 kids who can't do a damn thing, by the way, other than eat all the food. And I've got to build houses for all of these families. From what I can tell, only 2 adults will ever live in a house together, so the amount of houses you have sort of limits the number of adults you can really have in your village. But every time you build a house and adults move in, they will start a family, so they will start breeding kids, and suddenly, out of nowhere, all your stuff's being eaten. So that can happen. It's a little bit brutal. Brutal is actually a good way to describe this, even though it seems very tranquil from the start and very relaxing, and it kind of is if you play it at 1x speed, but it will take a long time to do that. Now, I mentioned earlier things like weather and seasons. Seasons are a pretty important factor. In the summer, I don't really need firewood. In the winter, I'm probably going to need a decent amount of firewood. Do I have any? Well, not really. It seems like we've burned through the firewood already, which is pretty ridiculous. So, did we even start with any? Maybe we didn't. Whatever the case, we need to do something about that. So, I'm going to... Yes, we are on 0 firewood. We've got a decent amount of wood coming in, though, so we're going to set up a woodcutter here so that I can actually make some firewood. And we can put it there. I don't see why not. Seems fairly reasonable. Do we have houses for everybody? Yes, we do. So everyone has a house, which is great. That's a good little start there. And now we just need to get this building done. We've got a lot of laborers. We don't necessarily need that many laborers. So I'm going to cut down the number of laborers and increase the number of builders to make sure things come up faster. I think you can see where this is going. Now, there is a bit of a difference between this and a game like, say, Anno. Now, Anno is really about becoming almost an economic superpower, in a sense that the economy is really important there. The idea of acquiring valuable resources and goods that you can trade for others and expand your empire. That's the focus there, and the idea, of course, of just making an almost utopian set of cities that have everything they could possibly desire and are very rich. Well, Banished never gets to that point because, well, one, there's no money. So any trading you're doing is through a barter system. So you're acquiring goods that you can trade to a trader for stuff that you can't otherwise get. Like livestock. You can't, as far as I know, there is no way at all to get livestock without trading. And there's also no way to get other things like, say, various seeds. You don't start with all that many seeds. You start with like 3 different seeds for crops and orchards. But if you want to acquire a wider variety, then you will need to buy them from traders. And in order to do that, you've got to set up the infrastructure to even have a trading port in the first place, which is difficult enough, I've got to say. You'll notice here there's a bunch of nodes. These are all the places that you can gather from. So this is actually not a bad place to set up my gathering. Admittedly, this river is not going to be too helpful at all. If there's anything over the other side, in fact there is, I might actually be able to build a bridge over there so my gatherers can go and wander in that general direction. Winter is coming. And once winter does arrive, we're going to need a lot of firewood. We're going to need to get maybe some more coats. The way to get coats is, of course, leather and... yeah, I think you can see where that's going. But survival is key. Survival is the focus here. And that is going to be something that some people are going to enjoy a lot, and other people are going to absolutely despise. Because when some people go for city builders, what they really want is the idea that they can just create a prosperous, thriving city, an economic powerhouse. Producing all manner of different things, and they can create different kinds of cities, like a mining city or a casino city and all that kind of stuff. There's none of that in Banished, yeah? Your cities are probably, at least when you figure out what to do, they're going to be built in fairly similar ways, yeah? And you will iterate upon them every time, because you will get to a certain size where your city is most likely going to collapse in on itself. You won't have enough food, disease, fires, disasters, and you'll die. You really will. I mean, it's slightly dwarf fortressy in certain respects, but it is most assuredly a city builder nonetheless. But it's less of a focus on economy and production and even just like building variety. You don't actually have a huge variety of stuff you can build. You can make 2 kinds of houses, wooden and stone, and you can also make a boarding house for the homeless. 2 kinds of roads, tunnels, and bridge. Storehouses, marketplace, trading post, a couple of basic municipal buildings like chapels and hospitals. There's these kind of, so 6 resource gathering places for food, and that's kind of about it. You know, the most fancy thing you can really build is a tavern and a church, and that's it. So if you're expecting any kind of technological advancement or anything like that, you're not going to find that here. And the trading system is fairly basic as well. You know, do you think you're going to interact with other villagers or something like that? No, that's not going to happen either. That's not something that happens here. Alright, it is snowing. That's pretty bad news. So we need to make sure that we have firewood, which we currently do not. But so I've actually sent one of my citizens over there to be the woodcutter, so he should be able to provide firewood for us. The gatherers are working. Gatherers can work all year round, although I would imagine that during certain seasons they are less effective. But compared to, say, food production from a crop field, it is arguably a little better, simply because you are able to do it all year round. The thing about the crop field is that you get that massive influx when harvest comes. But because the game is a bit of a dick, harvest can be bad. In fact, I'm pretty sure I lost my last town because my last harvest was terrible and everybody just died. I couldn't keep up with the amount of food that was required, and that was that. So you gotta be super careful, and it's extremely tricky. Okay, we could use some more wood, so this would be a good excuse to demolish that. We're going to build a hunting cabin there. There's, as you can see, there's loads and loads of wildlife in here, so we can use a hunting cabin very effectively. That also gets us leather, which will allow us to make more coats, because we are starting to run out of that as well. Now, the family aspect is quite interesting, because kids have to grow up in order to be useful. Otherwise, they're just a drain. You can educate them, and if you do that, they will apparently become more effective workers. The weird thing about the education system in this game is it seems to randomly determine how many of the kids will become students. Which is a little strange, I've got to say. It's not... It's just odd, in general. Really odd. Oh, I actually already had a hunting cabin. Huh. Alright. Well, that was dumb. I didn't realize that at all. That was pretty stupid. I should have got a fishing dock instead. Okay, right. Well, I will demolish that then. And I think we can Probably just, yeah, just reclaim the resources. Alright, we'll make a fishing cabin instead. Again, don't rush it the way that I'm doing it. This is clearly not the way to play, but it's good for demonstration purposes because I want to show you a slightly bigger city as we go through. I can show you my dying one. Yeah, I'll probably do that one later. Alright, can I put a... Come on, I've got to be able to fit it here somewhere. As you can see, the terrain can be a right pain in the ass sometimes. Like, no, we don't want to let you put it there. Well, I hate you. Alright, there we go. Fishing dock should do the job and should help us get through the winter. And looks like there's at least plenty of gathering coming from here. Interestingly enough, a lot of the statistics that you would expect to come from a city builder actually only come when you build the town hall, which allows you to gather census data, which is a nice little meta aspect, I think, to it. Admittedly, having access to that information from the start would be handy, but the game wants to lock it behind text, so, you know, so be it, I suppose. A lot of the game is managing this window, though, I've got to say. And if that's not your kind of thing, then you're probably going to hate it. The city does not really run itself at all. But that does mean that you are perpetually involved in it, and even if the game hits a slow point, you can increase the simulation speed to make sure that that's not a factor. I think we need to throw down a couple more houses here so that we can start a few more families. But honestly, we're not really earning enough food to justify it. You're going to be incredibly careful. Ridiculously careful. If you expand too fast, it can be an actual death sentence. Your village just dies, and it's a domino effect. When that happens, it's really hard to come back from it, because chances are you've needed that many people to make your infrastructure work, and now it won't work anymore, because you've just had people die. Like, your blacksmith dies, then all your tools break, your herbalist dies, and you've got no herbs to treat a disease, and then you... Yeah, it's definitely a domino effect. Certainly, the whole house of cards comes crashing down on you. And there's a degree of satisfaction to be had from that, I've got to say. And that might be what some people are looking for, but it also might be the absolute antithesis of what other people are looking for in a city builder. And it's kind of not what I'm looking for in a city builder, honestly. You know, I like games like Anno, the previous SimCity titles, and they do have this idea of just building a glorious utopia. And this is just, can I eke out a living without losing all of my citizens? It's a bit depressing, actually, I gotta say, especially when a bunch of your children start dying. You know, and the sad thing about it is, like, great, a kid died. They were useless anyway. They can't help me. Now that's one less mouth to feed, and then I feel like a horrible person. But, that is the reality of it. Alright, we're pretty good on firewood right now. We can redirect his efforts elsewhere. So we are at least fishing now. So we're getting a decent number of fish coming in. Gatherer's Hut is doing well. Might want to even get another one of those. But then you hit this point where you realize, well, I only have 15 working adults. So where am I going to send them? If I wanted to start farming right now, it sounds like a great idea in theory, but that would take half my workforce to maintain a farm. It's kind of absurd. I might go for an earlier orchard, perhaps. That might work. We could maybe make that work. Just want to make sure I don't wreck a bunch of useful gathering materials, if at all possible. You can put it down here. We'll make a nice big 15 by 15 orchard. That could work. Orchards take a while to grow anyway, so starting one off now might be a good idea. You'll notice health is a problem. You might want to get a herbalist in order to try and fix that. And people can start dying of diseases, and they do spread all over the place. But is it any fun? That's possibly the most important point. Yeah, I think so. It definitely, it's compelling, more so than, like, super fun, I would say. Because, honestly, the game is mean. Like, it is really, really mean. And it has no problem just crushing your dreams out of nowhere. But it is very focused on one thing. And that one thing may very well end up being its downfall for some people. Not for everybody, but for some people that just want more out of their city builders. There's no combat of any description, so you don't get invaded at all. The disasters are very limited. Fires and disease seem to be the most important things that tend to go on. there's no other villagers to interact with. There's really only trading, and traders come a couple of times a year and bring a random selection of goods that you can barter for, and you can also put in an order for them to come along next time. It's a pretty good way of getting stuff that you can't otherwise get access to, like livestock or just emergency resources when you have a particularly bad harvest. But that really is about it. Everything else is encapsulated in sort of tracking the lives of your little citizens here. That might not be enough for some people. I'm gonna be honest. It might not be what some people are looking for. And I don't blame them for that. I think that's a fair criticism to levy at it, but you should also bear in mind that that's obviously what they were going for. So it becomes less of, is this good, is this bad, and more of, I subjectively am not into this. Okay, we'll pop down a Forester's Lodge here, I think. Seems like a good idea. Foresters can reforest, by the way, so if you're worried about losing trees, that's not really going to happen. Although they do have a tendency of planting them in places you don't want them, though they are easily removed, so it's not really too big a deal. I have had a couple of problems with the AI, I've got to say. I've had the marketplace seems to cause some weird starvation problems. I don't really know why that is. It seems like I've got a bunch of food, say, at my storehouse, and then I put a marketplace down, and then the nearby houses starve to death because the marketplace either just didn't have enough workers or didn't stock up in time, and they lost the ability to go to the storehouse and get their food like they were doing previously, which is a little odd. I've also had AI and workers just randomly wander around, not get food that they clearly had access to, and die, and that's extremely frustrating, because it lowers the number of working adults you've got, and it most assuredly makes your citizens way less happy if their family members are dropping off left, right, and center. So it's definitely not impeccable, although with the prioritization... let's try again. Prioritization... God, that's a hard thing to say. Prioritization system, thank you, words, I have, for the most part, found that they do what you ask them to do. And if they're not doing what you've asked them to do, it's probably your fault. So, I think that's reasonable. They seem to have done a pretty solid job with it when it comes to having your citizens do what you want them to do. And that's fairly vital, because there's plenty of management or simulation games where that does not happen. Tropico, I'm looking at you, which is damn infuriating. Absolutely. And I think in a game based on survival and, more often than not, really living subsistence and year to year and hoping, kind of against hope, that you will be able to get a good harvest and not have all of your kids die off, you need that responsiveness. You absolutely do. And you also need the simulation speed to kind of give you time to think and not necessarily rush, which I'm certainly doing here just for the purposes of demonstration. So let's show you what happens when things go wrong. Well, I'd love to, but I just realized it will have actually saved over my autosave. It's... what would actually be nice, just kind of a technical point to make, is that this autosave right here, you can do more than one autosave for different cities. I wish it did that. More often than not, in a city building game, you'll have different cities and they'll each have their own separate autosave. This game doesn't do that, so it actually completely saved over about 8 hours worth of work because I didn't manually save, and now I can't show it to you. I'm sorry about that. And that's a criticism that I can easily levy at the game on a technical side of things, because it shouldn't do that. And you might say, well, you should be saving it yourself. I understand that. I get that. But other games don't do it that way. So, it would be nice if they did autosaving a little better, in my opinion. Would I recommend it to you? Well, only if you're really interested in trial and error, because this game has no campaign. It's got no multiplayer, it has very limited tech options, and you're going to be playing the same kind of thing every time. There is a specific build order that you do in order to actually succeed, especially at hard mode. Those build orders are already on the wiki, by the way. Wouldn't necessarily spoil yourself by going there, but it might be worthwhile if you're having problems with it. So, there are optimal ways to start in pretty much every circumstance. Even though the map is randomly generated. Wow. Okay. The map is randomly generated. There are still proper ways to start. Now, I haven't necessarily figured them out yet, but there are proper ways to start. And that is worth considering. And some people don't like that. They prefer to go free form, and I don't think a game like this really supports the notion of being free form. Now I'm in a bit of an awkward spot. I don't quite have enough adults, which is unfortunate. And I don't actually have... I don't really want to build any more houses, because there'll end up being more kids. And I don't really have enough food, so I'm basically waiting for the chestnut harvest to eventually happen after a number of years, because it takes an age to actually build an orchard, as you might imagine. You've got to grow the damn trees, for God's sake. I think we're going to... Speaking of growing the damn trees, we might want to clear out a little bit more down here. But you will sometimes run into these roadblocks where you're trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Do you have enough of this? Can you risk expansion? And if you take that risk and fail, you're in serious, serious trouble. So you better watch out for that. I can't really have anyone foresting on it. Actually, yeah, I can. I can pull a couple away from the builders. There we go. I like the UI of the game for the most part. I think it's pretty good. Although, I have to say that there is some unnecessary stuff. Like, why is it that I can't just click a building and just hit the delete button to actually remove it? Why do I have to go to removal and destruction tools and then go to remove structures? That's a little bit unnecessary. I think once you learn the hotkeys, that becomes less of a pain in the ass, but the interface is not necessarily intuitive, but it is very informative as long as you actually turn the stuff on. By default, it's not remotely informative, you know, not at all. But once you've got all of these options on, yeah, it does exactly what you think it should. So that's nice. If I were to criticize anything else as well, I think the soundtrack is not particularly compelling. Maybe I'm just used to the fantastic music of Anno or even the SimCity titles, but I'm not hugely impressed by the soundtrack. You know, the ambient sound is fine, certainly. Graphically, it's a strategy game. It doesn't really matter that much, but it looks alright, you know. It's okay. At least some low-quality textures here and there, but again, it is a city builder. It's not necessarily going to be ridiculous in that regard. I do like the water effects. They're very nice. Some good reflections going on there. The shadows are very nice as well, and the weather effects are fairly impressive. See the heaped snow and all sorts of things like that. It's nice. You know, it definitely feels like a village that's alive. That's a credit that I will give to it, because there are plenty of games that do city building where you feel like the city's dead, you know? And this is definitely not the case. Even your tiny village, everyone's always doing something. Each citizen has its own individual jobs, and I would say needs, but really it just needs to be fed and made sure that it doesn't die of exposure or whatever. It's a $20 game. For some people, it's not going to have enough. They want more buildings, they want more things to happen, they want things like combat. They don't want this focus on survival and farming and doing things like that. They don't want that. Okay. Yeah, I can understand. I can absolutely understand that. But I think that for those who are looking for a survival-orientated experience, well, we might just have found what you were looking for here. It's solid in that regard, and it's difficult. Very, very difficult. It's just this very careful balance. You go through certain periods where you feel like you're doing fantastically well, and then the game just kicks you in the balls out of nowhere. Everything falls apart, and you just think to yourself, what happened? What happened? And then you analyze your mistake, and it's like, well, better go at it again. And it certainly has that just one more play feel to it, I gotta say. That is something that I think a lot of people will appreciate. And it is perhaps the kind of thing that they are looking for. Very well might be. For others, it just won't be enough. You know, they were looking for more tech. They were looking for more of this, more of that. And that's a bit of a shame, but I certainly understand it, because, well, I'm kind of looking for the same thing, really. I have kind of caught the Banished bug, though, I've got to say. When I started playing it, I was initially disappointed by the lack of tech and the lack of things that you could do, but eventually, once I started focusing on this micromanagement aspect of it, and really kind of getting into the whole idea that this is more of a survival sim than it is a city builder, yeah, I started to dig it. I still prefer, say, games like Anno. I think that they just have a greater variety of things to do, and there's also a greater amount of satisfaction to be had from building those thriving colonies and trading and having sea battles and things like that. But I can definitely see the appeal of Banished. Certainly. The missus likes it. I mostly like it. Although, I've got to say it has frustrated me at times, but I think that's just me being bad. The game actually has a very, very high learning curve, even if it doesn't look it. It's actually, is it even fair to say? Yes, I think it is fair to say. Because I could say easy to learn, hard to master, but it's not even just hard to master, it's just hard in general, you know? Yes, you can learn how to place buildings, but you'll probably just die anyway. I also really need to get a herbalist because my health is going down here. I'm probably not even giving my guys enough of a variety of things to eat and all sorts of things like that. We need to sort that out. Absolutely do. Disgraceful behavior from me there. Disgraceful behavior. Pop the herbalist there. Do a little bit more fishing. It definitely drags out. Takes a long time. As I said, I sunk 10 hours into it. Did maybe 4 villagers at most. Most of them didn't survive beyond an hour. My latest one survived about 6 hours and then it fell to pieces. I think I'm encouraged to keep trying. I think that's probably the kind of best piece of praise that I can give it. Because I want to keep playing it. And I want to keep trying to figure it out. And while it may just be focused on one thing, for $20, that might be enough for you. So have a think about it. Banished, ladies and gentlemen. $20 on Steam, released on the 18th of February. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you next time.